Bye bye
Bye
bye
bye
bye
bye
bye.
bye. Bye bye
Bye
bye
bye
bye
bye bye
bye.
bye. Hey, Jody Raynsford. Hello, listener. Hey, do badders. How you doing?
Hey David Hellard, how are you?
I am well. Having told to you that I am looking like hell, I'm now pretending I'm full of energy and like, yeah,
Do
woo
you know?
woo woo.
Do you know what you look like? So if you're watching this on YouTube, this will make sense to you. If you're listening to the podcast, this won't make any sense. But there's something about you because I don't know what T-shirt you're wearing, but there's something about you that looks like distressed drama teacher today.
Like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's a bit.
you're halfway through a production and it's not going right, and you're it's that kind of look on it, like all the enthusiasm about the student production has kind of drained away. We're a few weeks away from it. No one's learnt their lines, and you're kind of going, "Why did I get myself into this?" That's the kind of that's how I think you kind of look today.
Why did I choose Pirates of Penzance? That's what I'm thinking. It's just
Yes.
not what. I thought it'd be fun. We could rework it. It's penny opera, more accessible, but not that accessible, is it? Really not. Yeah, no, I mean, although to be fair, I'm in the middle of sports heaven. It's just been
Sports heaven. Oh,
well,
what you talking about the football last night?
the whole
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, football. I mean, by the time this comes out, we hopefully will be World Cup winners, which I have 12 tickets to.
Where's the
12 tickets.
is it at Wembley? Is that?
Yeah, we're
Oh,
going to Wembley.
I was trying to work out. I was watching the semi-final, so we're talking about the England Sweden semi-final last night. I was trying to work out what ground is that? It's bloody Bramall Lane. I was like, is that the level of grounds that they're playing at? Like Bramall Lane.
Well, I think the semi-final had something like 26,000 people.
Yeah.
They're going to sell out Wembley. The good thing, one of the best things is about women's football is that when it came on sale, Briggsy loves a footy, so I bought I bought a whole load of tickets to the quarterfinals, which ended up being Germany against Austria. And Austria, by the way, is a very good country to chant names for. We basically chose all English football songs, and then you stress the ja for the yes in German, and it really is quite fun. I mean, we probably got about 4 or 5 other people who weren't in our group also singing along, which was a major achievement for us. But the good thing is the tickets are 30 quid each, 40 quid each. Like final tickets, I can't remember how much they are, slightly more, but you just think, well, for a Euros final at Wembley, might as well buy tickets because people are going to come even if it's not England. But now it is England. 12 tickets to the final. Sweet, man. But I just love
What I think is, even though it's women's football, it's still going to be Germany, England in the final, and we'll still lose to Germany. I think everything. It doesn't matter what gender it is. It's all going to default to the England-Germany relationship. We have to lose to Germany. That's just how it is.
It's
probably on penalties.
Maybe this new Brexit Britain. Maybe this is one of the opportunities of Brexit Britain is we can finally be good at penalties.
England women's football team is good because of Brexit Britain. That is incredible.
I'm still grasping for positive.
People are blaming Brexit on the queues at Dover. Yes, Brexit is why the England football team are so good. They have a renewed sense of self. Probably that's what it is.
But I love that there's a period in the summer where, because I used to love it as a kid, that suddenly there's just so many sports on because you've just had Wimbledon, you've got the Tour de France, you've got like the summer internationals or the autumn internationals in Australia for rugby. You've then got like World Athletics, and now we've got the Football Euros. It's just so much sport on. But I've noticed a few things that I thought were quite interesting about the athletics. So really out of date by the time this comes up, but I love it. Anyway.
You're used to it. You're used to it, listener. If you're a long-term listener, you're used to it. If you're a new listener, get used to it.
So, firstly, one thing I noticed now, because the trouble I've found already that athletics is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, harder to watch, or more niche, or yada yada yada. Usual complaints. And I've noticed this partly with the number of athletics tracks is being massively reduced. Local one, Dulwich, are ripping theirs up. There was only a 300-metre one already. There's fewer and fewer tracks around, and it's just really disheartening. But then they've got the World Athletics on the bead, which is great. But because of budget cuts, I assume there's no highlights show. And if there's no highlights show, it's basically impossible to navigate if you've only got half an hour. You're just scrolling, you've got 5, 6, 7 hours of footage that you're trying to figure out, right, who is it I want to see, when do I want to see them, what's actually happened today.
Highlights show.
No highlights show. And same with the women's football as well. You know, if we're talking about accessibility to sport and is not having all access to everything where you can't actually easily figure out what's going on. And so, there's no highlights for the women's football, for the athletics. And I think that's going to massively stop people actually watching athletics and women's football, because if it's not easy and if it's not as action-packed and entertaining, you know, if you're stood there for 10 minutes watching the introductions to who every single runner in the 10,000 meters is, while it's interplayed with like the heats of the shot put, you're going to turn off, right? That's just not as good as a highlights reel where they've interviewed the right people, they've really explained the sports with some nice VT packages, and you really get a bit of buzz, and then the actual races. So that to me is disheartening. But there are a few things that happened that I thought were great. One of them is my new favourite 5,000 metre runner.
Who's that?
So he's called Lewis Gradjalva. And I'm trying to think if he's I don't think he's do better, sadly. He's he's way too good to be do better. He's from, let's have a look. He's from Guatemala. He's got long flowing hair.
Guatemala. I've never heard the name Guatemala used in an athletics context before. I don't.
I mean, that's partly why he maybe seems so excited. So, a couple of things. In the heats of the 5,000 metres, this is the first time I've ever seen this happen, and maybe that's because of my ignorance. But you know when you watch it and you always think, why don't they just pace it evenly? They're going to get the fastest time they can. And we've had it explained about the surges and how actually people don't want to use up too much energy, and so they'd rather to the end. So Lewis was like, I don't know if I'm quick enough to qualify, so I'm going to run my PB pace. Yeah. So he goes off in the heats, and all the favourites and everyone else is behind. And he then just even paces out. And so over the course of the first few laps, he's just getting further and further away. And the commentators are there kind of loving it, thinking, this person's just clearly thought, I stand a better chance of qualifying if I run my fastest time possible. So that's what they're trying to do. And you're like, full respect. You're the first person to figure this out and to give it a go. And they all catch him up relatively near to the end. But by then, the pack is so stretched out that actually it works. He qualifies for the final.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Then at the final, you know when the camera pans along the list of runners?
Yeah.
And they're introducing people. When they come to him, he then celebrates like he's just won. He then starts grabbing the guy next to him and starts to get him to jump and like tapping him like, woo! Yeah! The other guy's trying to just concentrate and be like, I'm just about to race the final. I just think he's a complete legend.
How did he do in the final?
He did unbelievably well. He came something like fifth, having on the gun went to the front straight away. He's clearly just thinking, I'll run fewer, if I do this, I'll just stay on the inside the whole time, run less distance. He's a clever guy. He was a strategic guy. And he did great. He went out pretty hard because I think he was doing the same strategy. It's just that everyone else is getting harder. So he is my man of the tournament.
Wow.
And then the hurdles. Did you see the women's hurdles?
No, I didn't.
So go back and watch them because the commentary is really interesting as well. So there's this runner called Toby Emerson from Nigeria, and the trouble is there have been quite a few people done for doping in Nigeria.
Right.
And so you instinctively think, she's done really well.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? It's unfair, but that is like we say with any Russian. As soon as a Russian does well, if they don't do well, we'll go, the drugs didn't work.
If East Germany reform as a team, yeah. Oh.
They might. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they may be in hiding. Yeah, and that's the trouble. That that's the shame of drugs, is that actually it doesn't just ruins it for their whole country, really.
Yeah.
So it's worth watching, partly because you've got Michael Johnson there, who's saying he doesn't believe the Times.
Oh, really?
He doesn't explain what that means, and then you've got Colin Jackson.
You assume he means he doesn't believe the Times because obviously they might be doping, or is he questioning the quality of the timekeeping at the athletics?
Well, it's really weird because he actually doesn't believe the Times rather than the time, and the strange thing is, so Toby. Well, she's good, but she was nowhere near the favourite. You know, there's the American who was I can't remember her name now, who world record holder, super fast. But she went from a 12. She lost 0.2 of a second in the hurdles. So she broke the world record by a huge amount.
Right.
Well, if you watch it, I mean, it's beautiful to watch because it's the most perfect hurdling I've seen maybe since Colin Jackson. Probably better than Colin Jackson. Her top half just doesn't move, and her legs, it's just insane. And you watch it and you're like, yeah, actually, she's super fast, but wow, has she got good technique. But then everyone else in the heats and the other heats, they're all breaking national records.
Oh, really?
So this is where, and because Michael Johnson doesn't really explain exactly what he means by that, you're like, is there a slight cloud over this time? Or is there something, is it about the track because it doesn't seem that...
Is it bouncier?
It could be something like that, because we've had amazing times in not the 100, but good times in the 100, the 200, yeah. The 400 hurdles, in the women's 400, we've had some incredibly quick times. So could it be that a really bouncy track is actually even better for hurdles because bouncing...
Well,
But the height...
It would point to that, wouldn't it? If lots of people are having the same, experiencing the same heightened performance, you would expect that. Is it just in the hurdles? Have there been like lots of performances in other disciplines as well?
But not. I mean, there was the 200 men's was a super fast time. It's like the third fastest. Which, when you think it's Usain Bolt and Michael Johnson, who are just... It's strange how some sports you just respect those world records so much. The women's times have been fantastic as well. The women's 200, incredible. The women's 400 hurdles, incredible. I mean, the women's 100s, actually, yeah, there have been really good times. I think we probably... You don't notice it as much because I almost instinctively judge everything based off the men's 100, and the men's 100's going to be years before someone gets to Usain Bolt's pace. He's just so good. And so it was 9.73 maybe, really decent time, but you're still 0.2 down. So fascinating, just as a heat. And then in the final, she beat the record again, but with wind assistance. And so this is a watch this space, and you hope it's just that she's amazing because her technique is fantastic.
It's weird now, isn't it? Like how you wouldn't have, 10 years ago had a commentator of something questioning whether they believe the Times or not.
Yeah.
I mean, just out of kind of, professionalism towards other...
Almost out of
athletes.
respect.
Yeah, absolutely. A respect, you would never have that. And now it shows you how far it's got where he can say something like that. And,
Well,
he's not going to get into trouble for it.
it's almost that you need to say something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's got to the point where commentators, respected commentators, not like big mouth dickheads who go on talk sport
Like us.
like that. Like, exactly, who have like no, we can say as much as we want and no one cares. But like highly respected people in the sport who are questioning the validity of things. I mean, that is a big fucking jump, and that is a big worry for athletics and sport generally, because it just puts into question everything.
And the American hurdler who had her record broken, she was like laughing in like, I can't believe this. Because imagine that, you go in as favourite, massive favourite, and someone just leapfrogs you by 0.2 seconds.
Yeah. Was it in that situation? Was it someone that was expected to, or that come out?
She was good. She was good. Yeah, I mean, she's done well in the lead up. She's someone who you'd think would medal. I don't. And maybe I can't remember the American Irish name. Apologies. Maybe she wasn't quite on the form she was, but it sounded like she could do well, but she's never near those times. I mean, 0.2 is insane, right? Absolutely insane. But something else I've read really interesting about the championships, and we've talked about how we've talked with, like, for example, Holly Rush to do with contracts for athletes, and how now a lot of the money is going towards more your kind of run happy teams, or the equivalent of the is it Brooks Run Happy or the Essex friendly runners, whatever, I can't remember the called now, and how because of the amplification and the lack of exposure for senior athletes throughout a year, that the money is for sponsorship is going more to individuals who've got the following rather than the athletes. So I saw quite a heartening article in the Times, the New York Times, and it was saying how interestingly, so all the teams now have their own professional distance groups,
right,
in Oregon. So Nike has 3 professional groups. New Balance, Hoka, Brooks, Puma, Adidas, and On all have their own teams. And how actually, because they're now kind of real world athletics in their style, so they just pump out content about their training, about they're telling their story through the year, and how because of that, actually it's reducing contract penalties for world championship failures. So previously, you go into a world champs, and particularly if you're close to the end of your career, if you do well, you renew. Yeah. If you don't get paid, or you lose your sponsors, or you're penalised in some way. And actually, this article was quite good because it was quite insightful, just because it was saying now, because there's so much more to an athlete's journey in how it's portrayed, actually just, the world champions failure doesn't impact on their contracts as much. And so for example, on running, focusing on 2028, the Olympics trying to be, I think, the 3rd or the 4th shoe brand in terms of medals. Yeah. There in is it LA, the Olympics? So I just thought it's almost come round now where we've had the influencers who are normal people, and now because there's so many people who are used to that, whether it is a change that we're going to our Eilish McColgans and they're actually figuring out how to make the athlete the influencer. Yeah. And actually for their long-term success, it could be a better system, really.
This is something that I think we've touched on, haven't we, ever since we spoke to Colin, and Colin was saying that the issue with a lot of athletes is that they're not building their social media presence. They've got the time to do it. They're not building their social media presence. They're not doing that, and that's something that On talked about as well, didn't it? That they were trying to build their athletes into influencers as well. I'm not quite sure it was as organic as we would normally expect, because it felt like one came before the other. I don't think they necessarily picked athletes who were naturally sharing or giving, or I think they're kind of training them to be more like that, which I'm not entirely sure how well that is going to do in terms of building genuine connection with people.
But then think of the Spice Girls. They're not all loud. Well, they are. You've got your posh. If you think of your boy bands, you've got you've got Hellard from Take That. You've got
yeah, but you don't. But you don't support athletes in a group, do you? That's the thing. You don't think of athletes as a group, do you? You don't go, oh, this is the on-running group, do you?
But this is what's changing now, and actually, this is why. Because I was agreeing with your thoughts as well, that actually you need to be you need, if you're someone good at creating content and just someone who's charismatic, that's going to help you. But actually, the difference previously was there was athletes who were good at creating content were being rewarded. But now, because they've got these teams that are kind of houses, the cinematographers come to them. So actually,
I suppose so.
They're no longer having to motivate themselves and figure, how do I do these filters?
Yeah,
who should I tag?
They're documenting, aren't they? They're documented in that.
Yeah.
What was the name of the? Because this all kind of started, didn't it? When you mentioned the team in the US. With
called Copperberg or Tin.
Yeah,
Tin,
that kind of style. That kind
Tin Man.
Yeah, like that kind of we're going like behind the scenes kind of background style type thing.
Tin Man Elite, I think it's called.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it. Actually, I suppose that's the way to. That's the only way you can do it. Like they're not going to be naturally giving necessarily in terms of doing it. So we build the story. It almost turns into a kind of, I was about to say a WWE narrative type thing, but no, I don't mean that in any way. But it's almost you script the narrative and you build the narrative around them, but it's not their responsibility to come up with the narrative, because you know that all they're doing is focusing on the training.
Yeah, and actually it does seem that they are trying to develop brands where you're not following the Adidas team, you're following Tin Man Elite sponsored by Adidas or whoever they may be sponsored by, and then they're selling a huge amount of merch, and they're coming up with cool names, and so in the same way teams Hour 7 are trying to be a UK ultra team, I think they are.
Is there actually any proof that this will work? I mean, has anyone ever success? I mean, because it seems like quite a new concept. We also know about teams with football teams and stuff like that, but they've been teams established in that way for many times, and they can swatch people out and things like that. And I suppose that's the other thing, isn't it? You're not, by building a team, you're not wedded to a particular athlete, although you will have certain athletes within there who are stars and everything. But is there any example in running in the past where people have supported teams outside of their national team as a concept, or is this completely new in this area?
Probably not. And we're speaking to the athlete manager of NN running team soon, who's a marathon team, but no one knows that they're the team. No one knows Kipchoge's in NN running, Jake Smith is in NN running, or Ninka Brinkman. They just happen to be the management group. No, I don't think it has. But because it's social media, the proof is almost week on week, where you can see the views. And looking at Tin Man and Eat, for example, I mean, they've got 60,000 subscribers on YouTube, which it strikes me for a brand. It depends what their support is. So that's obviously not bad, but if that's compared to an Adidas running and I think they are Adidas, that's still relatively small, right? And so but will these become brands, sub-brands in their own right in the future? Are we going to be having sub-running categories where Tin Man is Tin Man that wave going through, and will there be a new team name for the next round, which is heading to the next Olympics, and there's a village there? Or will people graduate out of Tin Man and new people come in? And
Well, I mean, for the brands, it's great, isn't it? I mean, it's ideal for the brands because we're like, well, we don't necessarily have to tie ourselves to a particular athlete. We build the presence because the difficulty is you can invest a huge amount of money in an athlete, a huge amount in them, and then if something happens, their performance goes down. They get pregnant, they drop out of the sport, they retire, things like that. You lose all of that. You lose all of that following. You lose all of that. It's quite a risky business. Whereas if you peg yourself to a team, it's.
Let's see, runners do retire.
Yeah,
teams don't have to.
The teams don't have to. But I think it just goes without saying, like, will it work? I think it's an interesting concept, and I think as well, it's definitely something that BBR should tag along to. Imagine a BBR team. Can you go? That's the team that you'd support, isn't it? That's the team that you'd have all those kind of shenanigans. That
we almost need a name, the opposite of Tin Man Elite.
Aluminium.
Although Tin Man in itself is
aluminium barrel.
Yeah.
Scraping there.
Yeah, the barrel.
I do. The thing is,
bad barrels.
Thinking about it's really interesting. It's like doing this, thinking about social media because again now, like, my son's into football. I'm just knee deep in football stuff, and so I get football stuff served all the time. I get football, because of course I'm showing him, here's clips of this, here's clips of that, stuff like that. But some of the social media for some of the football clubs really good, and a lot of it points to the fact that they have to build their social media around a team, but actually, and footballers more than anything are very good at social media as well, because they can be very visual about. You don't have to be playing a match to do something that's quite entertaining. Like you could be doing
a little trick shot.
You can do trick shots. There's so many things that you can do and stuff like that. Don't really want to talk to them because that's not probably the best use of their skills. But the things like Man City, their social media is incredible because the majority of their social media isn't football. What it's doing is creating situations where they're interacting with the players in different ways. So I don't know if you've seen that. There's a guy who I can't remember his name, but he stands at the entrance to places in a kind of a smoking jacket, welcoming people into it. It's been like all over social media, welcoming people, and he's like in this kind of like 1920s, like
same guy.
Same guy, but what they did is the social media team got him to stand at the entrance of the Man City training ground. So every time the player came in, he would give like motivational speeches to them and stuff. And you saw all these players like looking totally, and it was just like that's got nothing to do with football, but it's kind of showing like how those different characters are reacting to it. And the other thing that they do really well is they tell fan stories as well, because the key thing about that, they'll have like they did this amazing one where they had this this kid who was about 14 or 15 taking his granddad who had Alzheimer's to watch City, and he obviously he'd not seen a City game and stuff like that, and it filmed him on the day and stuff like that, and he's got Alzheimer's, dementia, and he can't, he couldn't remember where he was in certain, when they were driving and stuff like that. And he got there and they started chanting the chants and stuff, and all of a sudden he kind of lit up, and it was just like, oh my God, I'm crying! This is just amazing! Like what have they done here? This is incredible! Because all of a sudden he's like come alive, stuff like that. And you're like, none of this is anything focused on the team. It's not focused on it's all focused on everything around it. So I just wonder whether that is. I've never seen. I think as a team, if you're creating content and you're obviously documenting it, you have to kind of show both the character of the group and how the group interact with each other, because I think that's the thing you really want to see, the dynamics of how much of a team are they? Are they do they have banter? Do they is there a cocky one? And I think in the on-running group there clearly are those characters, and you want to see how well
George.
Exactly, that's it. But also, I suppose that's the missing part of it, isn't it? It's like, who are the supporters of these teams? Who are the fans of these teams? Like, because that's the bit you don't know. You feel stronger as a fan of something when you see other fans interacting with it as well. It's a really
yeah, true.
so
Yeah,
that's the bit I don't know how that if they can develop that, I can see the team thing working.
but I think that what we're missing is that probably is why it will work is we don't have the collegiate athletic system that the States does.
Yeah.
And if you're there in a collegiate team, you're looking up, right, to where am I going next? And your dream is to be in one of these teams. So actually, that's your MBA.
Yeah.
And that's when you start being like, well, who are you trying to go for? Like, which one do you want to do?
There's a hierarchy, isn't there? There's a hierarchy that we don't have that doesn't.
Yeah.
It's less structured and it's more. It's not a clear pathway, and I imagine that the collegiate system also brings out a lot more of it probably focuses on the athlete a lot more as well, and there's a greater awareness of those athletes coming through to a probably wider audience.
Yeah, and the fact that people will go and watch their university athletics team, whereas we wouldn't even know where.
Exactly, I know. I
don't even know where
they'll have cheerleaders, they'll have like bands playing, there'll be things flying overhead, and you're like, oh wow, is this a big game? Oh no, it's just their athletics team. They're just doing some training or something. You're like, wow,
yeah.
That's true. There is a much greater cohesion of support around that system.
But even in schools, there's a far more structured, and colleges a far more structured competition. And so I'll see on YouTube videos will often be served up where it's talking about like Kate Tui, I think, who she breaks the under 18 5K record at the age of 15, or 13-year-old wins, blah, blah, and they have a national championship that is, we might have a schools cross country championship potentially. I don't even know, but it's not got. Because all of the school system in America almost is hierarchical.
Yeah.
Therefore, their athletics clubs are hierarchical as well, and they've got their state teams there that seems to be far more. People follow it a lot more than in the UK, even from all ages, and so I really can see when you're already thinking about. Your college you'd go to would be, you might choose because it's athletics. You wouldn't really get that unless you went to Loughborough in the UK or maybe Bath, just because athletics is such a small sport really that you're never going to have a career out of university from other than those two universities really. And so
why is that? This is a very, very big question. But why is athletics such a small sport? Like, considering our heritage in it, and the fact that when it happens, it brings the country together in a way that other sports don't. When it comes to the athletics, is when we think of the Olympics, we think of the athletics, don't we?
Yeah.
Like, it's not as if it's. Like, why isn't it bigger? Why?
I think it's just because a couple of things. I think one is smaller country. Fewer brands based here, but also sport in universities is so small because sport is dominated by rugby, football. You're stripped off to these other sports beforehand, but our university system isn't really, strangely, even though that it's so much easier to compete because you can travel. We just don't have that glorification of sport in the same way at universities where. You primarily do sport at uni because you love playing that sport, but the sports themselves don't have the funding at universities they don't have coaches who are scalping new players. And I'm not really sure why that is, because even if you speak to Will Ryle and people like that, they were saying that there is a massive drop off after college. You go to college to do athletics, and then there's no running teams, there's no running clubs in the same way they do in the UK. you're then just like, I've finished. Now, what do I do? So it's very strange because it almost it's disjointed, but it people and maybe it's because football is so dominant over here that everyone supports a football club, and the fact that I'm here at the East Dulwich is our local team, and it's the Vanarama League South second division, and he gets 3,000 fans, nuts. But whereas in the States, when I was sailing in West Virginia, the whole state didn't have a team in the NBA, the baseball, the hockey, the American football. They didn't have a single team in the top league. So the whole state is like, who do we support? And they support their college teams.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why, is because there are fewer franchises and fewer high-level teams in the States that people lack that connection to a sports team, and therefore it's all focused on their university. And there's an element of, like, I do think Americans have a lot more pride in the university they've gone to. You look at their alumni are so strong, and their donations and the identity of your university. Whereas here, I mean, no one I know knows I went to like Imperial. No one cares. I don't really care. It mattered maybe
Imperial
my first
care.
2 jobs. Imperial, I mean, they cared in there, like they're trying to scrub off all, and that's the thing. So there's not that. I don't think we're as passionate about our community, our local community, other than football, it seems. We don't have that love of the school we went to, the love of our university, the love of our country, the love of... So I don't know if that's the right answer, or...
I just think it's a really interesting question. It's a big question, but it's like you think it's like not because of lack of success, because normally... because we're incredibly successful athletics, but it's almost in spite of the fact there is zero enthusiasm for it. Both watching it outside of... Yeah.
Could it be
Olympics.
Space? Could it be that easy? There's just not enough space. I mean, if you look how many tracks there are. There's so few tracks now in London.
Yeah. But it's but the tracks aren't being used. I mean, like, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, if they're not being used, that's because either people aren't aware of them, or they don't know how to use them, or there's not the support or infrastructure around it, or it's just it's really strange. And you'd think it would be a kind of a priority for any of the... I suppose I was going to say the next thing is the absolute fucking shambles that are our athletics associations. If you want to point to something that why things aren't working, I have a very negative view of them, and having dealt with them.
That 1 year of setting up the club has just tainted you beyond. See, I haven't got too bad a view of them. Well, I mean, I've got a terrible view in the fact they tried to kick three voting positions off the board for clubs. Just horrific. Yeah, actually, screw them. They're absolutely dreadful.
You changed quick.
No, just that to me just speaks of cronyism, nepotism, not listening, the fact they don't have athletes.
Don't forget incompetence.
It's just you're right.
How can we stop? Okay, that's there is a question for do-badders. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, put this in the comments. If you're listening to it on the podcast, going to the Facebook group, what can we do to change the state of athletics? What do you think is the reason why athletics are, I would say, in a sorry state in terms of amount of support it gets, amount of visibility it gets, the fact that, like you're saying, they're not even doing bloody highlights packages on, and you just think there would be a basic element in this. Why is it being neglected? Like, why is this situation in the way it is? There's lots and
we spoke about this a little bit with Chris Thompson when I was asking him about how he feels about turning up to places where empty stadiums for the UK Championships, and look at women's football. They're just giving out tickets to kids to go to. Yeah. And they're making it fun. Like, it's so lovely. Actually, that's the thing, going to the women.
Do you know what? I watched a I watched it. There's a really good documentary series on BBC, and it was about the formation of the Premier League.
Yeah.
And you forget before the Premier League comes on, because everyone talks about the Premier League. Oh, it's the death of football and things like that. And that can be true, I think, in respect of like it changed the game. But you remember what games used to be like, how hooliganism was there, how football attendances were falling and everything. And what they did was brilliant in terms of, you know, transforming how that sport, how football was seen, and it saved football. It saved football in this country, and it turned it essentially into that. From that sprung everything else, and that's why football is such a global sport. But, you know, by a long way, most popular sport in the world by a long way. But yeah, that, like the very specific things that they had to do, and it has to be really purposeful, and it's more than just giving away tickets, and it's more you know, the great.
It's a million things, isn't it?
Exactly. There's infrastructure things. There's way that you negotiate coverage. There's all those different things to bear in mind, and even things like, you know, in Spain and places like that, they build other teams into brands as well. So like Real Madrid has a basketball brand as well. So it's got a basketball team. And I think a lot of the, like, I think Bayern Munich has a basketball team. I think PSG has they have other teams associated it, and they're building on the brands.
Yeah.
But they're helping lift up those other sports. And I know you're like, well, you know, it's got the, you know, of course it's got those other brands supported with it and everything. But I don't know, there people are doing stuff which is kind of innovative and making a difference. And I just think, like, for something like athletics, but when we see the popularity of something like you know, parkrun, and the fact that parkrun is so popular as a participation sport, and that's needed an outlet. That's the thing that has needed. There's an outlet. You know, that has released some kind of pressure that's been building for a while. But it's like, how do you go beyond that? How do you take everything that's happening there and turn that into enthusiasm about athletics and enthusiasm about running on a bigger scale? And that gap hasn't been bridged yet. But there must be some way, you know, like there's a next stage on from parkrun, there's a next stage on from that, next stage on from that. So yeah, do badders, your views are most welcome on this, because and then what we'll do is we'll send them all to England Athletics and see if they've got a fucking clue.
Well, we've got a few bits of feedback from the within the group that so I did put out a
negative or positive.
So one of my questions about 2-3 do bad stuff ago, I'd ask.
You said 2 or 3 do-badders ago, as though you've murdered someone. As though they're victims.
Well, I mean, certainly our victims that are listening to this. But I'd ask whether anyone else's club had banned training of adults and juniors at the same time, or was it just ours?
Just to recap on that, the idea was that your club has banned the mixing of juniors and seniors for safeguarding reasons, I think they said, didn't they?
Yeah, it seems so. You could no longer train at the track when the juniors were training at the track. It seemed that it wasn't to do with runner numbers or to do with the track being overwhelmed, but just to ensure that adults and children don't mix. And so I was wondering whether this was just a precaution or something that was being rolled out.
Was it a precaution or was this bullshit? That's really what you wanted to find out.
Well, the main thing was we actually. My view still very much is that so much of health and sport and fitness is about ease, and so much of good habits is not having to actually make a decision and just it being and removing any hassle out of it. And so if you're if you're a parent and a child, if you're having to do 2 different sessions to do a session each, then you're going to instantly lose. You're losing the kid or you're losing the parents. Or you're losing or both, because it's so. It does seem it is separate. Separate times. So Steve James, like Worcester, has a different time. Same evening. Richard Talbot was like, different times, but same night. Which I guess that maybe is the compromise where it could potentially work. Andrew Robinson was like, they don't allow them to train together. Matt East was saying theirs has started to go that way. People on the committee throwing in safeguarding like health and safety, used as a stick to break things. It's just so. Although there are some. So Neil Catley was saying they all allow mixing, and generally run the same time-based interval sessions. I mean, that's great, right? So does Andy Gatwoods. So it does seem like it's a mix, and it's bizarre, right? I just find it. Does it show how out of touch people are? That you adults and children, there's not some weird thing where if you put them together, danger happens.
No.
Like, we mix all the time.
Especially if they're with their parents. Like, you're there. They're not as if they're on. Now, when they're training, they're on their own. Before, their parents are there. Like, how the fuck is that a safeguarding issue? It sounds like safeguarding's being used in a sense because people don't like children being there.
Yeah, and whether I mean, you never know really. And actually,
how many pedos do you potentially think you've got in your club? if you need to, we've looked through the list and we're suspect at about 10% of the men.
And how quick are they? How quick are they?
Yeah, exactly. We can't get rid of them because they're part of the team. So I know what we'll do. We'll ban the kids. We'll stop the kids from running just to, like, what? It's just bizarre. Like, how?
And is this does this lead to fear mongering? You know, if more clubs are doing this, do other clubs then think maybe we should be doing this? Whereas, if anything, we need to be encouraging more and more interactions with everyone.
It's going to put off parents. I mean, like, that's the thing. Inevitably, it's got to put off parents. When everything is moving towards trying to make things easier for parents, where you have, co-working spaces that have creches in as well, in order to simplify things. When you have all of those situations where people know that you as a parent, your life needs to be as simple as possible, and you can't even be running around all that much. The idea of adding an element of resistance into it is a killer. Yeah.
So, I mean, and maybe again, this is another contributing factor for why athletics is
running clubs. Running club committees are killing athletics.
So thanks everyone for your feedback on that. And it's just, hopefully we'll come up with some solutions and offer them up a tree somewhere. But we've also had some feedback on some of our slating, which we like the most.
Oh God.
Now, can you guess what subject they are replying to? The email is from Nigel Chidgey. Can you imagine what he's referring to?
Oh, I'm not talking about people called Nigel.
Indeed.
Oh,
Indeed.
I remember that. So you don't hear many people called Nigel anymore.
So poor Nigel.
What's his thought?
Poor Nigel. Apologies, Nigel. So Nigel very kindly rating. Well, I could not believe it on my run this morning. Listening to my favourite podcast, you start to slag off the name Nigel.
And
how British it's...
Not slagging it off.
I can't remember. I mean, there's a chance we were.
No. What we do? I think we were saying that whenever Americans come up with, in films, they try to come up with the most British name they can, and they come up with Nigel. It doesn't exist in America.
Well, he said how British it sounds, and you can't think of any famous Nigel. Now, understandably, Nigel can think of every famous Nigel.
Oh, of course, he must be. Yeah, perfect. That's the best person to reel off some Nigels. How has he done it?
We've got Nigel Mansell. Fair play.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one we missed.
Nigel Havers.
Oh, Nigel Havers, yeah.
Nigel Lawson.
Nigel Lawson, yeah. Nigellers.
The Chancellor.
Yeah.
Chancellor?
Yeah.
Nigel Farage. And Nigel Thornbury. Nigel Thornbury?
Oh, Thornbury, I don't know who that is.
I
I mean, to be fair,
cartoon
apart from Nigel Havers, that's not a great set of Nigels, really, is it? Like Nigel.
Nigel Mansell, I mean, he's a legend of racing.
He's a legend of racing, but bloody hell.
Yeah. I mean, if you were... It almost suggests if you were stuck in a lift with Nigel...
I was about to say stuck in a lift was the first thing that came to my mind. If you were stuck in a lift with any of those Nigels, you wouldn't be particularly happy.
And Nigel Havers has lost he'd forgotten his keys or something. They're like, crap, where's Nigel Havers? But Nigel also sent in an extra link, which... so he also said, before I go to the link, I do agree it's not as common as Dave, or even a girly name like Jody, but we are diverse. And I agree, it did drop off the league table. I mean, I'd suggest they're not that diverse, if you think of it.
I don't know. I'd like to think of anyone who's not white Caucasian called Nigel. That's... And I don't mean as an alternative Chinese name or something. I mean like originally named Nigel, who is not white Caucasian. I think to me it seems white Caucasian, British, almost colonial.
I've just Googled Black Nigel. That doesn't necessarily locate all people who are black and Nigel, but there is a man called Nigel Black.
Absolutely deadly. It sounds like a kind of a superhero, a Nigel superhero, doesn't it? You know, as in like kind of like Black Adam or Dark Knight or something like that. It's like Black Nigel. Nigel moves in the shadows of night. He goes around killing accountants.
Black Nigel. And but Nigel goes on to slate me for saying, oh, woe you, basically, for saying you're not being chosen for London's paces, having talked about how injured you are for the last 2 years. So yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean,
it's a bit of abuse at the end.
Yeah, good. I mean, yeah, you've got a point there, given that I am injured again.
That does assume that people at the London Marathon listen to the podcast, and we can probably categorically say that they don't.
And in my defence of that, I would say, when I was injured before, I let them know within good time, and they got Richard McDowell as their pacer instead. I mean, what a superstar! But he also then shared there is a Nigel Knight that celebrates a dying breed. And this is an article from the BBC 2019. More than 400 Nigels came across the world, who gathered at a village pub to celebrate Nigelness.
What village did they celebrate in? Come on, please say it be something called Nigel Town or something like that.
Yeah, Nigelton. So sadly not. So with fewer than 3 Nigels born in 2016, I think there are none born last year. Nigel Smith, who runs the Fleece Inn near Evesham, Worcestershire, said he wanted to do something to celebrate the dying breed. So 432 odd Nigels from 7 months old to 80. So they did have a baby Nigel there.
Oh, baby Nigel!
That is, oh wow. And they've got an entertainment was put on with a comedian called Nigel and 2 Nigel singers. I mean, that is glorious to see.
It's like a clan meeting, isn't it? It's like, yeah, that's great. When I say clan, I mean Scottish clan, not Ku Klux Klan. I'm not saying, oh, Nigel's a massive racist who were burning crosses on the village green at the end of the evening.
Nigel Kennedy, there we go.
Nigel Kennedy, oh yeah, okay. The bad boy of violinistism.
Isn't there a chef, Nigel? I'm thinking of one who looks like Nigel Kennedy. No, but maybe... Oh, he does lovely British food, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, Nigel. It was like is it like River Cottage or something?
No, he's more upmarket. He's more kind of slightly Michelin. He's lovely.
Nigel Slater, yeah, that's it.
Nigel. Oh, Nigel Slater. Nigel Slater. Yeah. Yes, he's a nice guy. Yeah, there you go. I guess there's a bit of diversity of Nigel Kennedy, Nigel Slater. So
does Nigella Lawson count as well as the female version of Nigel?
Oh, I bet they're all wanting to. Yeah,
they're adopting that. Are they?
Adopting that. So,
she's the queen of Nigels.
so fair play, Nigel. I think you've made your point. I'm not sure what the point was, but respect and thank you for emailing in. We love that. Well, I feel we've done quite a good roundup of the week's life. And all.
So yeah, the summary on this one is what's it called? 45 minutes on athletics and both the future athletics and why athletics is not in the state it should be globally and in this country, and then the same on Nigels.
Is the decline? Is it correlation or causation?
The decline of Nigels and the decline of athletics.
Yes.
Wow. Is that correlation or causation?
Wasn't there a famous hurdler called Nigel?
A famous what?
Famous hurdler called Nigel.
I thought you said there was a famous elephant called Nigel. I'm like, I don't know how many. I'm not big on my celebrity elephants.
Nigel Levine. No, there's not really a famous Nigel athlete. Nigel Levine, British track sprinter.
Nigel Hawthorne we haven't included as well.
Hawthorne?
Nigel Hawthorne, he was in Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, I know the guy. Oh, yes, of course. They're all old, the people we're referring to, aren't they?
Yeah. What a surprise.
No new Nigels. Yeah. Well, thanks, listening, guys. If you want to send us some feedback, then letters at badboyrunning.com.
Have we offended your name recently? Please let us know how many there are in this country.
Are there any other Nigel listeners? We want to hear from you, and we want to hear your views. Any Nigellas? Or are there any names that we feel are as in danger as Nigel? And for our international listeners, who is your Nigel? What is your Nigel? What is the French Nigel? What is the Nigel in Saudi Arabia? Are there some names that are the equivalent that we need to try and save as well, and to also correlate with the death of athletics? The letters at badboyrunning.com. If you've got any suggestions of future guests, then David at badboyrunning.com. We've got some unbelievable interviews coming out soon. Tommy Price, wow, we interviewed him on Monday. He was pronounced dead for 3 hours on the side of a fell, and that story is... just insane. So that's coming up shortly, as is interview with John Album, where he talks about his really his imposter syndrome, even though he's world trail champion, unbelievable, and his new training methodology as well. If you want to use his app, album.app, it is it wasn't Queen Bean, it was Pato Banton is your discount code. So use it, try it, it's free, it's great, it's really nice user videos, all by him, and he changed the methodology. So give it a go for free. We're not being paid for promoting this. We just think it's great and we love John. So give it a go. It will motivate you.
If you want to join the conversation, head over to the Facebook group, type in Bad Boy Running Podcast, answer 3 questions, and get in the Facebook group now. If you want to buy merch, we have plenty available, although not in extra small or extra large sizes, it seems. Head to store.badboyrunning.com.
And we have been, actually, we had a meeting of all of the lovely Do Better helpers. So Nick, Andy, Anya and Maria. And we're going to try and be a bit more engaging in the way we use our contents in the future. So we're going to be producing more clips, more videos, more how-tos, but also trying to find a nice way where you can record videos or audio that actually works so that we can get you properly involved in the show. Because that's something I feel we've been missing with us just becoming massively disorganized in the last few months.
I thought you were about to say with us becoming massive. I was going to question that as you were saying. I was like, with us becoming absolute powerhouses of the comedy running podcast scene, which contains 3 podcasts in total.
Indeed. Well, that's just it, guys. Please rate and review, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Fuck you, buddy.